Hello everybody, welcome back to another killer concept. Today we have a very peculiar one, as though I would like to say. It's called the Animate. Now it sounds like a very strange thing to call it, but let's get right into it and you'll find out why. Basically, this killer is one that takes hold of survivors. So, more often than not, you're facing 3 survivors against 1 killer, because you're taking hold of one of them. I felt like I wanted to create a sentient weapon that would be the killer, just to mix things up a bit and have a bit of fun. But without further ado, we'll get straight into their basic information. They are a 4.4 meters per second killer. When a survivor is possessed, their speed increases to 4.4 meters. So, even though they look like a survivor, they will be moving a lot quicker. One way to notice them. On top of that, they will also project a 24 meter terror radius and have their red stain. So a survivor walking up to you with a red stain and a terror radius, definitely avoid them. Their height is the height of every survivor, as you possess them to be able to do your actual killing. And your weapon is a sentient sword that each survivor will hold as they're possessed. Now, how the survivors get hold of you will be explained in their ability. Killer Possession. Each generator has swords placed within inside of them. To be able to repair the generator, you pull out a sword and hold it to the survivor. Each one of those swords that you hold in your hand has the possibility to be possessed by the killer's spirit. So, working on a generator and pulling out a sword will alert the killer's spectre, which will then be able to jump to that generator and possess whichever survivor is holding a blade. This works for all generators. Once a survivor is holding the sword, they can be possessed, and possessed survivors do have a way to fight against the killer. It's similar to the wiggle when they're being carried by killers. It is a much harder to pass and does take a lot longer, but while you're doing that, obviously the killer will wobble from side to side, and it's a great way to try and prevent them from attacking people. Once that bar has been filled and you manage to wiggle out of the possession, unfortunately you end up being stabbed by the blade itself and you lose a health state, but then the spirit disappears along with the sword, making it so anyone else who's holding a sword at a generator again can then also be possessed. Now, this isn't all doom and gloom. When you end up attacking another survivor with the weapon, you can choose to jump the possession onto that person. So, say you're chasing someone who's been a royal pain in the ass for you as a killer. If you manage to attack them once, you can jump onto them, and it gets rid of that pain in the ass play until they wiggle you out. This will happen throughout the entire game until you manage to kill your first survivor. They do not get sacrificed to the entity in that case, but your blade then becomes their blade. They become a permanent possessed person. And no, this doesn't mean that they can resist you and come back into the game. You no longer have to worry about being resisted. Though you still have the ability to jump to another survivor when you hit them, if you so please. On top of that, to be able to make this killer work a bit more stealthily at points for more fun, holding the action button while possessing a survivor will cause them to sheathe the sword. This eliminates your red stain, eliminates your terror radius. Granted, they can still wiggle to regain control in that lot, so you would walk very strangely. But whilst that's happening, it allows you to walk up to survivors and get close to them. Though survivors, don't worry, it isn't an instant hit. When they're coming up to you and they release that action button, a small animation has to play for them to unsheath their sword. That does start off their red stain and their terror radius once again, being able to notify you almost instantly who it is, giving you enough time to react or at least try and run if you can. Now, without further ado, how about we get on into their perks that were very interesting to do, because I only had one wrote down on my notes, so I had to create the other 2 on the fly for this one, which was a pain in my ass. But yeah, let's get on into it. With perk 1, Living Metal. Sound alerts will go off on the first skill check on a generator. So once a survivor wanders up to a generator and starts repairing it, after that first skill check, a sound alert will alert you that there was a survivor working on that gen. So survivors, choose your battles wisely. Perk 2, Desired Connection. As a killer, you are able to stand still for a few seconds and concentrate. This will show you the auras of survivors that are within a certain proximity area of generators and other interactable objects. Though the aura is only shown to you visibly while you are concentrating. The second you move or do another action, their aura disappears instantly. This perk is also not affected by the Nemesis perk that allows their aura to be made visible for longer, just to make it fair. And perk 3 is a new type of perk. It's called Ritual Sacred Hammer. Ritual perks are very similar to the perk that the survivor had got a little while back. You can go to the basement and perform a ritual for a few seconds. This will create an item that survivors can use to undo the ritual. You can do this as many times as you want, but be warned, the ritual does take some time to do, so weigh up your options whether it is worthwhile doing. After you've done the ritual, like I said, the hammer will appear and it gets hidden somewhere in the basement for the survivors to find to unenchant. But as long as the hammer is in there and it is successful, all survivor actions are louder and successful skill checks can show heartbeats of the survivors. As in, anytime they perform a successful skill check, you see their killer or instinct kind of flash up on the screen, as it usually does. With their perks out the way, how about we get on into their lore, which is very odd. And there isn't much there about it because nobody knows much about a sentient sword because it all gets blamed in the person, not the weapon. It was during a time of war. This blade had been forged and reforged multiple times from both sides of this conflict. Resources were scarce, and there wasn't enough iron to make more swords and extra material with. So there was a job for scavengers. During certain parts of the day, they were sent onto the battlefield, where there was no one allowed to attack them. Not even archers were allowed to pick them off, because they worked for both sides. They ran across the battlefield, collected armor, weapons, anything they could find that could be reforged into new equipment for these people. It was the one time that something seemed peaceful in these never-ending wars. This blade somehow always managed to be found. Its blood-stained metal kept on getting reforged over, the blood eventually being drained and sucked into the sword. Over time, with this happening so many times over and over, a sentience seemed to grow inside of it. Residual energy from all the people that had used anger, hatred, violence. It was a bladed weapon meant for killing, and it knew its purpose. It was fueled by such negative but powerful emotions. As the war continued and more blood seeped into the blade, it gained stronger and stronger. It didn't enact its power on anyone during the war, as it just wanted to gain more power. So it always managed to make itself so that way if the person holding the sword was deeply injured, they would kill themselves and leave the blade stood up in the ground in their last action, making it so it was very visible and easy to craft into a better weapon or a new weapon by the scavengers. After the war fully finished and ended, a few years passed. This blade was known in the war for how many times it got reforged by both sides. It was noted each time a blade got reforged, a symbol got placed upon it, but every time it was reforged, this blade had the most symbols, so it was placed for display in a museum for many, many years. Though its purpose was known to it, it had to kill. It was designed to murder, eviscerate, decapitate, any type of way a weapon can deal damage to someone. It craved, and it had been stuck in a museum for years, watching all these people walk by that it wished to carve into many pieces. One night, some people came in. Although it didn't have eyes, it could sense living creatures around it, and it knew times of the day when people weren't there, and times when people were. This was a time when there should have been no one nearby, other than one sentient being that walks around every now and then. A group of 3 people appeared, took the sword from its casing, and disappeared. As they ran out, it did taste blood once more, and felt invigorated. The being it usually sensed most often than not, it was run straight through. Although it couldn't see still, it could sense the different people's auras and could tell the ones that were more common to it. This was the security guard that was patrolling the museum, one that the sword had come to know quite well and relished the taste of, since he was viewed as its captor and cage. As the sword tasted blood, it reawoke and possessed the person holding the sword. The other 2 people with them were killed there on the spot, run straight through and carved into many pieces. Even when they were already dead, it still hacked and slashed at them. It had missed being used for its intended purpose. The person holding the sword just walked out of the museum and carried on walking. Became a legend almost in town. Or a person who would go around and carve people up whenever they saw him. Was viewed as a madness, though obviously only one person had it at a time. They didn't know what happened or how this was working. The sword was smart. It knew how to hide its intense rage from people all the time. The blade wasn't a huge one either. It was easily concealed underneath clothing. And as long as it was piercing some sort of flesh and tasting blood, it could hold its murderous intent, preventing other animals and creatures from noticing its terrible, terrible intent. Unfortunately, after a few years of jumping from host to host as it had to kill them and get taken by someone else, it found that it was trapped in a corner. It had been repossessed by the museum, waiting to be displayed once more. It revelled in the thought. It revelled so badly that it wanted to murder more people. It was one of the things that it could always tell more and more people were walking by, and it could just imagine how it would kill them. The entity felt this pain from the blade, its desire to murder, kill, and destroy things. He thought it had potential. So, just before it got placed into the museum that night, he managed to influence the security guard to pick it up and pierce himself with the blade. Not just running it into himself, but all the way through. Though the blade never came out on the other side, as more of it got shoved into this security guard, more of it appeared in the realm, until the next thing the blade knew, it was in some sort of metal contraption, and then someone pulled it out. The aura filling its body as its consciousness flooded theirs. There was the first victim of the Animate inside of the realm, as a survivor hunted down their survivor friends without any remorse or knowledge of doing so. Thank you guys very much for listening to these videos. If you're enjoying my killer concepts, do leave a like, it helps me out a lot. And don't forget that if you want to hear more of these, hit the subscribe button. I try and release one at least every week, unless there are problems at home. And don't forget that if there is ever any ones that you would like me to do, say you have a book series, a film series, TV series, or absolutely anything that you would really want me to turn into a killer, or even a survivor, do let me know in the comments, or message me on my Discord, link will be in the description, and I will do a video for you about your killer. But without further ado, Cerberus is going to possess more mortal souls to lure them back into his lair. Ow!